Hi everyone, welcome to the Weekly Politics Show. I'm Councillor Premier with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. So in this section, we're going to discuss the Hong Kong Chinese community, the migration from Hong Kong to potentially Tower Hamlets, but generally the UK. The government has created a £40 million fund for local authorities to apply to basically help welcome and help integrate migrants from Hong Kong, similar to funds that were created for earlier migrant communities, including in the 80s, the Bangladeshis, and later on the Somali community in Tower Hamlets. So, Andrew, you've been been on social media, been talking about this. Um, what's your take? Is Tower Hamlets ready to welcome the Hong Kong Chinese community, and generally, are we ready for 21st century migration?
So I guess the classic, or the main question is, will people from Hong Kong want to come to Britain? And if they do come, will they want to come to Tower Hamlets? Yeah. And that's really the key question, is whether they'll find this place attractive. I mean, there is some suggestions that they might come here because we have already a big sort of ethnic Chinese community from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and sort of mainland China as well. And you can make an argument that the place most like Hong Kong in the UK is actually the Isle of Dogs and Canary Wharf. Lots of tall buildings with lots of water, and we already have this big Chinese community. And, and there is a historical context because about 150 years ago, the first Chinese community in the United Kingdom basically was in Limehouse. So we've had, a sort of ethnic Chinese community here for many, many years. And we've also got a number of Hong Kong developers who are active in my ward. So there's a 63-story building being built now by a Hong Kong developer. And then the Guok family from Hong Kong have also invested in the Ballymore scheme as well. So I assume they're doing it because they think people from Hong Kong will want to buy property in this area. But we just don't know yet. And the government funding scheme is kind of to set up 12 welcome hubs in the UK for people moving here from Hong Kong. And as a reminder, a lot of these people are moving is not necessarily for economic reasons, because actually Hong Kong on a per capita basis is actually wealthier than the UK and probably wealthier than London as well. But it is persecution and the political issues with the Chinese Communist Party. So they are genuine, political refugees in many cases. And then, also money from government to help with English language, and then translation to Cantonese, which is the language spoken by most Hong Kong people. I mean, many people from Hong Kong speak English, but it's not 100% either. So,
well, something similar was done when Hong Kong was handed over to the Chinese government in Milton Keynes. I remember Milton Keynes. I just explained to the listeners, I grew up in Bedford, which is just down the road from Milton Keynes, and Milton Keynes made a fanfare of welcoming civil servants from Hong Kong. So the British government made an arrangement with those Hong Kong Chinese who actually worked for the government to actually migrate to the UK, and Milton Keynes as a council created an entire community and welcomed them, and they more or less have the community is still there, so to speak. So it's kind of like on a much larger scale. Has there been any talk about this in the council? Are people talking about it, or in your conversation with Will Tuckley, has he mentioned it, or is it on their radar?
We sort of mentioned it this morning with Will Tuckley, basically to ask him the question, £43 million, were we going to bid for any of it? And it made a lot of sense that at least one of those 12 welcome hubs was based in Tower Hamlets, given the likelihood that at least a number of people from Hong Kong might move here. So the point of the meeting was to raise it with him, and he said yes, that they'd had meetings internally to talk about this and the funding. They hadn't said they'd applied, but I think it's only just been announced, so it is too early. But I think it's a real question for us. I mean, Tower Hamlets traditionally has been the first home for many immigrants over the centuries, from the French Huguenots to the Jews in the 1930s, to the Bangladeshis in the sort of 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then more recently the Eastern Europeans. And now, for example, in my ward, Canary Wharf, 55% of people in my ward were born overseas, from all kinds of different countries. And I guess the question will be: is that next big wave of immigration going to be from Hong Kong, and will it be to Tower Hamlets? In which case, it could have quite profound implications in terms of everybody thinks COVID will drive our population down, but actually our population may keep increasing because of that Hong Kong arrivals. And that has, quite important implications, for example, like, my local supermarket, Chinese supermarket, just moved into bigger premises. And in Canary Wharf, there are a number of sort of Chinese restaurants in the Royal Docks. There's a new Hong Kong style restaurant opening up, I think, next week, and they're making a big play on the Hong Kong link. So this could really, transform Tower Hamlets in the coming decades, but we just don't know yet because we're still at very early stages.
I think the indicators indicate that there probably will be a large influx of Hong Kong Chinese. You've mentioned the investments on the island, but I've also noticed that a lot of the developments, especially say South Poplar or on Lee side, I've seen on social media, they're marketed it in Hong Kong as well, a lot of the private blocks. And then further on, Royal Albert Docks in Newham, I think the previous mayor, Robin Wales, did the deal with the Chinese, and that's being maintained by the current mayor, and that's going to be a massive level of investment as well. So you got a whole belt of Chinese investment, and then you got the Chinese embassy at the other end, on the city in Tower Hamlets, facing the city of London. From your experience of dealing with large migrant communities in your ward, are we prepared? Are we equipped as a borough to deal with migrant communities now, or is there things that we could improve? What are the issues that you're seeing with current migrant communities, or are there any issues?
Well, I think, one of the main issues, which and the bulk of the government funding is for language, is for English language training. Because I went to Hong Kong, decades ago, so my kind of memory was, high levels of spoken English, and actually English is an official language of Hong Kong. It's widely spoken in the business environment. But actually, when I looked at the stats, about only half of people from Hong Kong actually speak good English. So it may well be that there actually are language issues. But one of the good things that, I think a lot of people who are working in Hong Kong will be working in the kind of jobs, HSBC, for example. So if they do move to the Isle of Dogs, their kind of work experience will be directly relevant, and perhaps even the same companies as what they were working for in Hong Kong. So I think the transition may be a lot easier for this group than for previous sort of generations of immigrants, because of the type of city that Hong Kong is very similar to Tower Hamlets, or the kind of employment patterns that we've got on the Isle of Dogs. But yeah, we'll see. It's going to be sort of very interesting to sort of see what happens.
I think it's going to have an impact on the politics, because the Hong Kong Chinese are not don't fit the traditional archetype of migrants communities to the UK. They're actually much wealthier than the average UK citizens, and they not just a physical capital, they bring a lot of social and cultural capital as well, which is going to be a different, interesting dynamic, in the sense that it is bound to have an impact on the way we do things in Tower Hamlets Council, and in terms of our politics as well, because they will be a very articulate sort of migrant community, which you don't traditionally find in migrant communities. But is our politics ready to basically accommodate the Hong Kong Chinese? What's your thoughts on that sort of?
Well, so traditionally, for a number of different reasons, and it will depend on where people have come from, because democracy is different in different countries. But traditionally, you'd sort of say that the Chinese community underperform or are underweight politically in the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, there's now there are some MPs of Chinese origin or sort of mixed Chinese, but for example, in Tower Hamlets Council right now, there are no councillors of Chinese origin. We did have one councillor before who was half Chinese, half English, but she retired in 2014. So that's going to be very interesting in terms of whether they will want or wish to be politically active. But one of the reasons why they're leaving Hong Kong is because of political persecution. So it's entirely possible that the people who do come here are coming here for political reasons, and therefore, again, different from previous immigrant groups where there was more of a kind of a direct threat to life or economic reasons for leaving. Whereas, one of the things I tweeted about was like the head of a Baptist church in Hong Kong resigned his position and then immediately emigrated to the UK. So again, that's a very different type of immigrant to some of the groups that have come in the past. And I think we just don't know yet. But I think, what we should be doing is doing some planning and preparation in case they do come in large numbers. And to be some extent, they're here already. The problem is, that the 2011 census did show that actually that in some parts of the Isle of Dogs there were quite high levels of people of Chinese ethnic origin. And one of the difficulties is that, when I say that, they could have come from, as I said, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, mainland China, Taiwan. So it's very difficult to categorize that one group in such a simplistic way. And the other point I should have said is not everybody from Hong Kong is Chinese origin. There are plenty of people of Indian origin because of the British occupation and sort of British involvement in Hong Kong for centuries. So not everybody living in Hong Kong or is a Hong Kong passport holders of Chinese ethnic origin. There are some exceptions as well. So,
well, watch this space, guys. Are you going to bring this to the full council, Andrew, in terms of a motion or a debate? Is that?
I think it's something we raised it with Will Tuckley today, but I think it's something we need to talk about but I think I'm kind of waiting for this year's census results to come out. And I really want to see what happened between 2011 and 2021 in terms of that population mix. And if it has changed like I think it has, that is then the time to have those discussions. But I don't know how quickly the census results will come out at that granular level of detail, hopefully more quickly than last time. But I think that will be the opportunity to do that, have that conversation.
No problems. Well, watch this space, guys. So we're going to go into a break. After the break, we're going to discuss the forthcoming cabinet decision on the public space protection order, or PSPO, on NOx gas canisters, which is the laughing gas canisters. And I know we spoke about it earlier on this show a few weeks ago when it was in consultation. Andrew did an article as well on social media. Now it's going to come to cabinet. So join us after the break where we discuss the public space protection order on laughing gas NOx gas canisters.